Welcome, folks, to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Every week, diving deep into the truth of Catholic social teaching and restoring all things in Christ.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
And we are coming to you live from Mercy One Studio at Iowa Catholic Radio here in Des Moines, Iowa. Again, I'm over here in Des Moines, as always, Director of Mission and Ministry at Mercy College of Health Sciences and the Director of the Zeta Institute for Foundation Ethics and Leadership. You can find us at mchs.edu and thezetainstitute.com. Bud's out there in Pittsburgh. What are you up to out there, buddy?
Director of the National Institute for Newman Studies at newmanstudies.org.
And if I'm keeping up on the news, are there any other Steelers who have left in free agency currently or traded away?
I don't know if we'll have a football team next year, so
yeah,
people just have to be satisfied with their salad and French fries.
That they have that summer football league now, which my son has watched a few times, and I keep wondering which plucky running back and wide receiver are going to be the replacements for Bell and Brown. So that D League running backs, Pittsburgh, I think, is a town that can get behind that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they take a lot of pride in their football, but there's some good players in the little league. At least Nebraska fans are sort of interested because a lot of ex-Huskers have signed up. Yeah,
that's true. Speaking of Huskers and this, that, and the other, ex-Iowa State coach, are you guys really going to steal the mayor, Bud? I mean, you could lord that over John Leonetti like every broadcast if that happens.
Well, it sounds really wrong because when you think Fred Hoiberg, you think the mayor in Ames, Iowa, and Iowa State.
Right.
But he was actually born in Lincoln. Or there's his grandfather grew up there, so he's got the true Nebraska blood.
It's already mythical about where he's from. So he'll go from the mayor to like the governor. They call him the governor.
We'll have to come up with a new nickname, but he can have whatever political position he wants in Nebraska if he takes us to the NCAA tourney.
Well, that's good. Well, if you need to be able to keep track of all of the coaching carousel or like which former over 38-year-old players are currently starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you might need printing cartridges in order to keep up with all of these things, and you can get that at Cartridge World, who underwrites our show, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights. Environmentally friendly way to keep up with all your printing needs.
Yeah, and pickup and delivery are available for business customers, so a lot of good things going on at Cartridge World.
And then always underwritten by Mercy College of Health Sciences. The big days coming up, but April 10th and April 11th, we have our inauguration festivities coming up. So President Doug Fiore, who's been on the show, hopefully we can get him back right before the big day. He got in and had stuff to do, so we put off having the inauguration till spring. And everybody's invited. We have inauguration mass 9 a.m. at St. Ambrose Cathedral on that Wednesday, April 10th, the inauguration. And then just different festivities. So, for instance, on Thursday, we're going to have a prayer walk around campus. We'll have food. We're going to have speakers for faith and healing at 5:30 p.m. at Mercy College on that Thursday, April 11th. Everybody's invited to that as well. We have national speakers that are going to be there. We're going to have a panel. So everybody's invited to all of that. If you go to mchs.edu, you can check out all the inauguration festivities that we hope people get to make it to.
Have you guys, I'm sure you've been doing Stations of the Cross during Lent on campus?
Yeah, we have. They've always sort of traveled around about what day is best. This year they're on Mondays, but people are definitely invited at noon to come to Stations of the Cross at Brennan Hall Chapel.
Yeah, it's been exciting for me to watch just like the development of campus ministry since I was first hired by Mercy about 5 years ago, and it's really taken off. So kudos, Bo.
Oh, that's crazy. Half decade ago, because that just seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
That you were luring me with the charms of Des Moines out here to meet all of these good Iowa people. So, Bud, speaking of, charms, one of the charming things about Lent, we don't usually think of the nice, charming things about Lent, is the Holy Mother Church knows that we're not all going to probably be Lenten champions that hold up our fasting the entire 40 days. So judiciously throughout our calendar, we're given days throughout the year that really give us a respite. We have the solemnity like St. Joseph. The Irish get to have St. Patrick's. The Benedictines have St. Benedict's feast. But what everybody has, if Lent runs as late as we do, is March 25th is the Feast of the Annunciation. So that just happened a few days ago. And it seems like something worth dwelling on, not only because, it just happened in the middle of Lent, but precisely because the Annunciation, I would almost have to argue, as a feast, has been eclipsed in some ways. We don't often think of it in league with, for instance, Easter or Christmas, but certainly in many parts of the Middle Ages, and a lot of European identity, the Annunciation is one of the chief and principal feasts. And I think there's a lot that we can learn about the Church as a body and what Catholic social teaching has to teach by dwelling on the Feast of the Annunciation.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me looking at church history that, for us, Christmas has become so huge, and for good reason. But historically and in different parts of the world, sometimes other feasts like the Annunciation or like Epiphany were almost bigger holy days. And so this episode of the show is really about adding another day of obligation and another reason to skip work.
That's right.
To the church calendar.
That's right. So, if you need to hear a radio show that confirms that you think you work too much, we're here for everybody.
Yeah.
Nope. So when we get back, we'll dive deeper into the Annunciation, its ramifications, the history of its celebration, and hopefully give people something to dwell on in the middle here of Lent. So this is the Uncommon Good. If you stick around, we'll be back after these messages to talk about the Annunciation. So see you in a bit. But if people have questions about the Feast of the Annunciation, if they want to cry around about where Hoiberg's ending up, or anything else like that, if you're John Leonetti and you realize that all of the glory sports days are in the past, you can contact us, 515-223-1150. That's 515-223-1150, the Zip Whip line. Zip Whip line's not working. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
The Zip Whip line, yep. So if you... 515-223-1150, 515-223-1150. You can text us. If you do hashtag UCG for the Uncommon Good, we'll make sure to look out for it. We can read it next time as well. But if you have questions on air, please feel free to let us know. Or, like we've said before, we've listened to input on your show, and we'd love to hear it. So make sure to use the Zip Whip line, 515-223-1150. 515-223-1150. This is the Uncommon Good. After these messages, we'll be back to talk about the Annunciation.
Thank you, Farm Bureau agent Cindy Schulte, for underwriting Catholic Women Now. As an authorized independent agent, Cindy's team can provide health insurance options from Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Iowa. Cindy Schulte at 1315 50th Street in West Des Moines, or on the web at cindyschulte.com. 515-226-2111. Cindy and her team know health insurance.
Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Iowa is an independent licensee of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. Products available at Farm Bureau Financial Services.
Impoverished children break everyone's heart, but poverty seems like such a big problem. What can one person do to make a difference? For 17 years, Blessman International's passion has been to connect the resources of our donors with sustainable programs that impact the lives of impoverished children in South Africa. Our donors are feeding thousands of hungry children every week, providing basic water and sanitation for impoverished communities, and sharing the love of God in practical ways every day. Go to www.blessmaninternational.org and make your donation today.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
At Golden Rule, you already know we obey the rules to live by. We know that there are no medals for providing outstanding customer service. It's just what you do when your customers are like family. That's why we provide state-of-the-art training for all of our employees. From customer service to routine maintenance and new equipment, you can always count on Golden Rule. And by taking care of our family, we can take better care of yours. I'm Bobby from Golden Rule, where we deliver respect, understanding, loyalty, expertise, and service every time you call. We have a standard and we prove it. Online at goldenrulephc.com.
Back The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr joining you today. Like we said, a few days hence from the Feast of the Annunciation, which is always March 25th. Bud, jokingly, I should tell you Happy New Year, because for a lot of people in Europe up until relatively modern times, March 25th is when they would consider the beginning of the year. So Happy New Year starting in spring.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that idea.
The argument, which is funny how these can become arguments, but the argument was whether you should have Lady Day or Circumcision Day be the beginning of the year, because January 1st, before it was known as the Feast of the Mary Mother of God, was known as the Feast of the Circumcision of Jesus Christ. And so you had people running around being in like the Circumcision Day counting party or the Lady Day counting party. And the church is marvelously weird, and we get to have awesome conversations like that. I'm all for, if only social media was just knockdown, drag-out fights about that sort of stuff, life would be a lot better.
Well, Bo, I get into like these the kind of theoretical conversations that are had around dating, and for some people, when they hear like, oh, our Lord was conceived on March 25th because it's 9 months before Christmas,
right? That
sounds like too convenient. But when you dig into this history, there's just all these fascinating reflections on, I mean, obviously the sort of central moment of world history is the incarnation. This is that to which everything runs toward, and from which everything flows after it has taken place. And so, there was this idea that obviously with the coming of Christ we have a new creation, and so that his conception coincided with the day that God created the world. But it's really cool. You've already pointed out in relation to Lent that, you have this solemn feast day in the middle of Lent. Sometimes I think in 2016 it took place, the Annunciation overlaps with Good Friday.
Right.
And so you have, even at his birth, Jesus' life lies in the shadow of the cross, but you have this precise juxtaposition of the Annunciation and his death on the cross.
Well, and if just to go back to the two dates that were the prime candidates, it's interesting, right? There are a few people that try to say, oh, well, the New Year should start with Christmas or Easter. But the predominant thought patterns split into two, because they're like, no, those are feasts worthy of their own to be considered on on their own. But the two ideas was like, well, salvation history really begins with, and the argument was the moment that Christ, like you said, was incarnate, formed in the womb of Mary, or the circumcision is when he gave his first blood for sacrifice for us. And so that was the impetus behind January 1st. And so that's a mirror of what you're talking about, right? So in Christmas, we have the glorious feast days around the birth of Christ, but then we have the Feast of the Holy Innocents, the Feast of Circumcision, where we the foreshadowing of the cross. And then here in Lent, like you said, we have, we're in the desert 40 days, but then we have something like the joy of the Annunciation to always let us remember that we hold all of these things in tension, and that as much as when Jesus, of course, does all of this for us and only he can merit this grace for us, that all along the way he has asked of his people, particularly his mother, and all of us sort of figuratively in his mother, to go along with all of this, to ask, right? The Annunciation is this announcement of what God plans to do with Mary, these miraculous things to save the world. And this is, for me as a convert, it was always what helped me get past any hang-ups I might have had about Marian doctrine growing up Protestant, was Irenaeus pointing out that Mary is the second Eve. And so the first Eve was given the choice to fall to temptation or not, and she chose to do so. And this new Eve was given the chance to go along with salvation or not, and she said yes. And this feast really gets to the heart of the matter with Lent, right? Do we say, behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it done to me according to thy word? Are we willing to do that? Because otherwise we're just trying to, do ascetic Olympics and outdo other people, rather than dying to ourselves and letting our will be born again with Jesus.
Well, one thing that has always sort of grabbed my fascination or attention in the Christian faith is these different images that we have of Christ. And of course, on our show, one of the predominant images is Christ the King. And so we sort of try to present to our listeners Christ in glory, and also what that means for our common life together. With the Annunciation, you have the mystery of the Word made flesh becoming, like, consigning itself to the womb of a woman. And yet that's not, like, the images of Christ the King and the Christ child. Like, it's another one of those, like, tensions that are held together. And so, like, I don't know. I hear different takes on even, like, the devotion around the infant of Prague. Like, why do Catholics sort of have this devotion to a child and then dress him up as a king? But for me, that sort of thing has always captured in a profound way that the God who came to save us and the God who will reign over all, he came, not so to speak, like forcefully, or he didn't impose himself upon humanity, but he came in this small way, and that's a dominant theme in the parables of Christ, that the kingdom of God comes like a tiny mustard seed.
Well, I think people miss, like you said, what the sort of reconfiguring that's going on there. There's a way in which, if what you draw from the story of Jesus Christ's life, death, and resurrection is to kind of cast off all usage of power at all, that you miss how radically the inversion of how power works is. And I mean, so just for background for listeners, for what Bud and I both went through in grad school, that makes it sound a lot worse than it is, but you get my point. We went to a school very much colored by Anabaptist theology that really, complete pacifism. What Jesus is the rejection of all use of force, coercion, or power. This gets problematic when you do anything like, then why should I have to, pay my fees to the grad school that I'm going to? But, beyond getting...
I've stopped disciplining my children.
That's right.
After all that.
Right. But what I'm getting to, right, is if there's a way in which you cast aside, like, all kingly imagery, you miss the brilliantly... And not ironic, just like telling a joke to be sarcastic, but this way in which the world is turned upside down by what Jesus is doing, when you see that royal power is vested on an infant, right? That the best royalty must be like a child, or it's not true royalty at all.
Well, and Bo, when we talk about all these things, I'm sure in the minds of some, like, they might ask, like, isn't Christendom, in a sense, like, contrary to what you guys are saying? If God came to us in this lowly manner and in the form of a child, even a peasant child, didn't the building of this particular civilization didn't in some ways compromise the kind of pattern of life that Christ gave us? And I don't know, I've really puzzled over this, but I think, like, even if you think about Western history and what the church sort of like achieved in the Middle Ages, like there were Christians or followers of Jesus who, like, their goal was simply, I would say, like, political power. But really, I think the energy that are the dynamics that energized Christendom were precisely individuals like Saint Benedict. And like, you think about different saints who confronted kings when they were acting immorally and things like that. And now, as we see, I don't want to sound too apocalyptic, but as we see our civilization taking a different course, I don't know if it's because Christians have let go of the reins of power. I think it's really, again, that we've stopped believing in the power of grace. And so, I mean, to get sort of brass tacks about it, like, what may, so to speak, like, do in our civilization is just people not having the energy to continue to raise families, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's where, I mean, we think it's weaponry, or we think it's military force or whatever that gives us power. And obviously there's instances where you say we are called to protect the innocent. But really the rise and fall of what you could say is like Western Christian civilization has a lot to do with people's faith and trust in God.
Well, I think it also gets wrong. It misses the ability for the truly... I mean, people just use these words over and over again, Bud, like revolutionary and things like this. So yeah. I think they've sort of lost some of their impact. But what I'm getting at is it's not just that Christ came and removed all sorts of things. It's that his grace sort of infects things and hollows them out and completely transforms them. What I mean is there's so much of, if you just like try to ignore things like power or completely like never deal with it again in your life, that, you know, you've consigned entire parts of the world away from God, right? Like you really do start to have something that's almost dualist, or I think a lot of times they're Marcionite, which Marcion is a heresy, right, that says that the Old Testament is all bad and that only the New Testament is good. We had Dennis McNamara in Des Moines over the weekend, and he was talking about the importance of understanding the temple to understand church architecture. And there's no two ways about it. The temple is royal, and it is very much imperial, right? The Hebrew people, there's no such thing. Like, the temple doesn't get built if there's not, like, the Persian, Greek, Roman empires, right, like, influencing it all. It's so much imperial. But so there's one way to say, well, when Jesus claims he's the temple, he does away with temples, or there's a way in which Jesus is like, temples are mine now, and I'm going to influence all of them. And I think that that's how we get the glory of something like a Gothic cathedral, or the glory of our churches, right? And so the impulse for things that are usually called integralism, and what people can get into those sort of debates, is that that's what we sort of do. Like, we plunder the Egyptians' gold, right? We find things that are worthwhile, we infect them with Christianity, and eventually they transform. And isn't that like sort of what grace is not always going to be like St. Paul on the Damascus Road, like a vision that knocks us off of our horse. In many ways, the grace of God seems to be this thing that slowly grows in us. I'm always using infection imagery. Like last year, I said that the best sort of Catholicism would be like a nasty rash that's contagious. But I think that starts to be a good metaphor for how we see things happen, right? Is even the institution of power will start to be infected with this idea of Christianity. You want to be a real king? You got to be like the king, the Prince of Peace, who ruled like a child, right? So the Infant of Prague. Yep. And the Annunciation's like, oh, so do you want to be the most pivotal actor on the world? You might think that's like taking up a sword and conquering all these people, but actually it was a lowly girl who said yes profoundly to God's extravagant offer to save the world through becoming incarnate. And if you get rid of that sort of tension, there's just, I think you on purpose unplug the power source to most of what makes Christianity so electric when it comes on the scene in the world.
Yeah, I like the stark terms that you put those in, Bo. I guess channeling McNamara a bit, because if we go full-on Anabaptist, it's hard to make sense of the conquest of the Holy Land or the building of the temple. And I know there's this idea, and I mean, obviously, like, we're dealing with some complex, like, biblical realities, but that with Jesus, you know, Christians are called to live, like, there's not that same connection to the Holy Land that the people of Israel had. But I think it's a mistake to go from that idea and to present this, like, radical discontinuity. Because, like you said, Jesus doesn't do away with temple. He says, like, the temple of my body will, in a sense, like, spread throughout the entire world. And so I think Christians rightly have always said, like, faith can't be coerced. Obviously, evangelism at the tip of the sword is just a mistake of reading Jesus. But there is something coercive about missionary activity. Like, a missionary has the boldness to say, like, I know Christ is Lord, and I'm going to proclaim this regardless. You know, like, there are times where you have to, like, shake the dust off your sandals.
Right.
But St. Paul goes into the Areopagus, and he says, like, look, you guys have these longings for the divine, but you've misunderstood it. And we at the very least have to have, like, the boldness to proclaim when people are in error, because they don't necessarily have, like, a full recognition of what God's done on behalf of humanity.
Yeah, I think about the Magnificat, the prayer that Mary says right after the scene of the Annunciation, where she goes, he has had mercy on those who fear him in every generation, speaking of God, of course. He has shown the strength of his arm. He has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and have lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. So if there's no idea of, like, royal power, like, what do those words mean? I mean, at the most, I guess what they say is, like, well, Mary's just being super metaphorical, because in actuality, God is gently removing the rich from their thrones, and he's highly suggesting that No, he's shown the strength of his arm, right? What he's shown is what true ruling looks like. What does a ruler look like? And it looks like something like Mary praying for God to show the strength of his arm. It looks like a baby swaddled in a manger is king. It can be precisely paradoxical. It's no longer like what a Roman emperor might think, or some sort of chieftain of one of the barbarian tribes, or whomever it might be.
Yeah.
It's not like we think a president or the head of the UN probably thinks either, but it is still power. It still casts down tyrants. It still lifts up the lowly and tumbles those who have had enough. And that is what the Annunciation, it shows, right? Like that God chooses to do, not to undermine and throw away things like order and power and rule, but to present them in a completely, radically different light, the light that only shines with His grace.
Oh man, there's so much great stuff packed in there, and I think even back to the Old Testament. I know for some of my students, it's sometimes hard to make sense of the fact that the Old Testament has all these glorified images of kings and a Davidic king who will reign in power and glory, and then the kind of criticism of the Israelites when they ask for a king like all the other nations. But as a good professor of mine showed me in the past, it's not really the desire for kingship where Israel went wrong, but it's the fact that they wanted a king like all the other nations. And so, I mean, even from the very beginning, Moses prophesies a ruler who would follow Torah, and so all kings are weighed against whether or not they conform to the law of God. And then you get to Jesus, and in the New Testament, we're told that Jesus disarmed the powers and the principalities. And, the reader on the surface is like, what? He was executed. But Christ, precisely by reigning as the Davidic king was called to reign, he showed the illusory nature of all kinds of kingship that would be founded on any other foundation. And so, I mean, yeah, we could go on quite a while on that sort of thing.
Well, and again, I think people... I think their worry is that, what Christians are going to do, and maybe rightly so, this happens, they're going to look at a king and go, well, Jesus is like that, but just, a little bit better, or whatever it is, and it's going to look, the afterlife is going to look a lot like things now, and if we're worried about anything about how the world is now, and there's plenty to be worried about, that this somehow is, only replicating the way of the world, but christening it, quote unquote, and, giving it the thumbs up even when it shouldn't have the thumbs up. But I think it's actually quite the opposite. What we could say is every king is a pale imitation of what true power looks like. And that true power, because it's truly sacrificial and it needs nothing, so the rule of God, since it's the will for the subjects, for the love of the subjects without remainder, there's no fear in God. God rules and doesn't have this part of his life where he gets antsy that someone else might usurp his rule, so then he starts doing... we see this even with the best Christian kings in history. Some of them will have just really great runs as being very good and helpful and doing all these things, and then they get jealous, or they don't manage their children well, so the children, once they, when the king dies, the children, make a mess of everything. They spoil their children, these things like this. God won't die. God doesn't have to divide his kingdom. God has no fear about people overrunning his kingdom. So God's rule can be perfect, and it can be perfectly powerful, but oftentimes exactly through the weakness of his subjects. And so that is not to say that God throws off power and rule and order and all these things, but as the perfect manifestation of it, we are always the one grasping at shadows, and not, the metaphor, so to speak, doesn't work the other way around.
Yeah, so in the second half of the show, are we just going to go ahead and rank kings?
That's right.
We'll go back through history and...
It's a 64-team tournament of the best kings, and no, that'd be horrible. It'd be awesome, but that sounds like 3 months of work, Bud, and we really talked about this show on Monday, so probably not.
It'd be less controversial than best presidents.
Nah.
We really want
to... That's absolutely true.
Shake up the airwaves.
Well, On that note, we'll go ahead and get to break. And when we get back, we'll finish up talking about the Annunciation. This is the Uncommon Good. We'll be back after this. But if people want to contribute, I think, to this 64-team bracket tournament of which kings are best, or you just want to throw out anything about the Annunciation, or if you just want to keep up with what Iowa Catholic Radio is up to, you can follow us on our social media pages. If you go to Twitter, we're at IA Catholic Radio. On Facebook, if you just put Iowa Catholic Radio, you can find us there. IowaCatholicRadio.com. As always, you can sign up for our newsletter. There's the elusive, secretive Instagram account, which I think at this point we've graduated to taking pictures of still life flowers on tables. So, you can try to go find that. But like I said, all sorts of ways to keep up with us, to keep informed about what's going on, but also let us know how you're feeling, have any suggestions for the radio and everything like that. So please visit us on our social media accounts and online. This is The Uncommon Good. We'll be back after this.
Thank you, Blessman International, for their support of Iowa Catholic Radio. Everyone lives their life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. How we use that time directly affects if our life will leave a significant impact or not. Each year, Blessman International leads Central Iowans on a 12-day, all-inclusive experience sharing the heart of Christ with children in South Africa. Teams are forming to do something significant in an African child's life. Learn more at blessmaninternational.org. That's blessmaninternational.org.
CTO provides tuition assistance for Catholic school students. This coming year, many more families will qualify for aid, particularly middle-income families who now need extra support to cover the rising costs of Catholic education, which means we need your help more than ever for our kids, for families, and to empower some of the best schools in Iowa. Want to help? Please donate online at ctoiowa.org. Let's do this for the kids and their future.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
Men, the Iowa Catholic Men's Conference is Saturday, March 30th at St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church, starting with an 8 a.m. Mass and conference to follow. Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers and Deacon Randy Keel are the guest speakers for the Iowa Catholic Men's Conference. Deacon Harold is an author, evangelist, preacher, and co-host for EWTN's Morning Glory, heard weekday mornings on Iowa Catholic Radio. Deacon Randy is a marriage and family counselor. The Iowa Catholic Men's Conference, Saturday, March 30th at St. Francis of Assisi. Find more information and register at iowacatholicradio.com.
It's the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. We're back with you. Speaking about the Annunciation, like I said, 2 days ago, on March 25th, many people in the past in Europe consider that the new year because it was the start of the new order of the new dispensation of grace. So, Bud and I have been talking about the Annunciation and all of its ramifications. Usually when it's just a show of Bud and I, we do a Great Moments in Church History. I will take the blame that I forgot to write one out, but the church has already provided two good ways to wrap up this great moment in church history. You can either pray the Angelus, which literally is about when the moment the angel Gabriel spoke to Mary and that she said her fiat, her yes. It's a beautiful prayer. Angelus typically prayed at 6, noon, and 6. Or the Magnificat, which is the song Mary sang right after this event as well. So if you want to celebrate the Annunciation, a very much one of the greatest moments in church history, and you need something to pray the rest of Lent, for instance, the Angelus or the Magnificat are the way to go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, Bo, when you were talking about a great moments in church history for this morning, I think when you read the Magnificat, like in the light of some of the great moments that we've done, it really does sound like almost like a great sports call, and God, Mary just proclaiming the kind of victory that God will ultimately win.
Yeah, that's right. He has mercy on those who fear him.
Yeah.
I see it, yeah.
But, Bo, on Monday evening, I was out with some friends and talking to a friend here in Pittsburgh, and he was sharing something with me, and it raised a question in my mind. And whenever I have a theological question, I'm like, Bo will have an opinion about this. So if I could spring one on you, my friend, his dad was involved with the Catholic Medical Association, and several years ago, they actually, I hope I'm not spilling any beans here. I don't think so. They had kind of a push to have the Feast of the Annunciation added to the Holy Days of Obligation for Americans in the U.S.
Right.
And the idea, in part, was as doctors, as physicians and nurses, they really wanted this feast to gain greater prominence because, unfortunately, I think for a lot of us it has. We don't think of it in the great pantheon of feasts necessarily. So they thought by bringing the Feast of the Annunciation to greater prominence, that it would be like a great way to remind people of the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception. I'm just kind of curious. Actually, a bishop sort of shot the idea down because he thought it was sort of like maybe politicizing too much a mystery of the faith. I mean, what do you think about thinking about some of our feast days in that light?
Well, I don't know. That starts to be an interesting way to talk about that. On one hand, I think the Annunciation, purely on its own merits, could and should be a holy day of obligation. I wonder if it's a holy day of obligation in other countries. I'll look at that up in a second. When it comes to saying that you politicize things, I don't know. We can mean politicizing things, in two ways. On one hand, I think the point of our show is all of these things are very political. Christmas is a very political feast. Herod thought enough to kill a lot of children over it. Easter very much is a political feast, right? The entire world order was shook and turned upside down at Easter. I know that it's not a holy day of obligation, but you think of even things like Corpus Christi, which really do start off, Eucharistic devotion, but it really takes on sort of political aspects as well. The day you came into the church is political, right? That was the Our Lady of Victory of the Rosary, right?
Holy Name of Mary.
Holy Name of Mary, yes.
But yeah, it's right around. It's September 7th, the victory at Lepanto.
Yes, yep. So, I mean, on one hand, I want to say all of these things are inextricably political. Perhaps there's something to say if the sole impetus was to make a pro-life win or a pro-life point in sort of politics way. I can see that. I don't know the souls of the people who are saying this. It seems like there's certainly more than political reason to want to show that. I do think it's a beautiful way for people to, when you hear the sort of canard that people have only cared about this or thought of infants in the womb like this very recently. I mean, it's obviously not true if the Annunciation is when we see that, yes, the incarnation begins, and if for whatever reason there's legitimate reasons not to do it in the United States, which again I would be prone to think there are not legitimate reasons not to do it. I think that's something for us all to dwell on, right? That Jesus Christ himself didn't come to us like a fully formed adult man. He became, a zygote like us. He started in the womb, formed for 9 months like we do, and encapsulated all of that.
Well, a quick factoid and then some further commentary. So I talked to Mr. William Wikipedia.org,
right.
And the Annunciation is a holy day of obligation in Ukraine. So way to go, Ukrainians.
Good job, Ukraine.
Carrying that torch.
Good job, Gabriel. Sorry.
Not in Italy, surprisingly. I thought they took 25 days a year off. But no, Bo, with what you're saying about the politicization of things, I think about this even so. The Feast of the Annunciation, we think about both Christ and Our Lady, but when conversation turns to the Blessed Virgin Mary, I've had different theologians talk about this, and some, for lack of a better term, who are more progressive, will say the kind of exalted Marian devotion of the past obscured the more political nature of some of So there's been a push in late 20th century theology to say Mary, our sister. We turned her into almost this, in some people's minds, like a goddess, and that obscured the fact that she was a woman who, we've already talked about the Magnificat. And I think the imbalance goes both directions. So I see sort of what theologians like that are pressing or what they're trying to preserve. But if you look at something like Our Lady of Guadalupe and the devotion there, And that's one of the most exalted presentations of Mary. But it was also, I mean, it flowed out of the experience of a people who, you know, for many years they did experience hardships, and they saw this coming of Our Lady as part of their liberation, as an expression of God's divine mercy for the poor. And so I think, ironically, those who say, like, well, let's just call Mary our sister, like, they actually make a mistake in the wrong direction, and they forget that some of these exalted images were points in history where God did intervene on behalf of the poor and the oppressed.
Yeah, I was talking with my friend from Wichita, who's Vietnamese, and he was talking about Our Lady of Lavang, right? And I'm messing up how to pronounce it. Forgive me.
Yeah.
But when Mary, the apparition to Mary to the Vietnamese Catholics in the forest as they're being chased away during one of the early persecutions by those who would be against the Catholic Church, just like in the 1700s, I believe. And he, with utter confidence, was saying, like, well, Mary appears to us because we're her children and she loves us. And I go, well, yeah, why do you think Mary has a, because he's like, Mary has a special interest in the Vietnamese people. And I said, well, why do you think that's the case? And he's like, well, she loves us more. And I was like, oh. And I go, why do you think so? And he says, because she loves her poor children who are suffering. And that's a very political claim, right? Like Mary, if the take is Mary seems to appear where people who are her children are being persecuted, and like a mother, she comes to succor them. And so I think that starts to be interesting. Is that politicizing? Did Mary herself decide to enter a political fray? Well, very much so. But I part of that, I think, Bud, comes down to us. We have a very equivocal. We equivocate with the word politicization. Yeah. Because on one hand, we mean, like, of course it has to do with ruling and the polis, the city, and citizens and things like this. I think in the United States, we've also sort of made a noun where politicizing something, I guess that'd be a verb, excuse me, means like trivially acting like something that has more importance, like using it as an aid to win political battles that don't matter as much, or something like this.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I might throw in is there might be better or worse ways to do that. Like, we don't have to say, oh, today's the Feast of the Annunciation, it's this glorious day in the Church's calendar, ergo, and then move directly to, I don't know.
Right.
Like a voting roll call or something.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, just to talk about and celebrate these things, I think part of what you're saying, Bo, is it does confront people with truths about the world that inherently have political implications. And so to know that God became man and that he entered into the womb of Our Lady, like, that should remind us of the care that we should show for the most vulnerable. And if you miss that, it's not really like you're being sufficiently apolitical. You're kind of like elating the truth.
Right. And I think that's what it comes down to, is it's the direction. If we profoundly dwell on the absolute glory and mystery of what it means that God eternal came to a mortal through his angel and said, behold, these things will happen, and then waited for her to respond with a yes, right, and then Jesus was formed in the womb of Mary like us. If you dwell on that long enough, the outpouring will be, well, then I have to do whatever I can in the time period I live in, the civilization, the city, to protect, to say that life is sacred by the sheer fact that Jesus Christ, who is, the second person of the Trinity, entered into it. And therefore, blank, 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 right? The therefore comes from dwelling on this mystery first. If, on the other hand, you have a political goal and you're like, what parts of the Bible can we crib in order to get ammunition for our side? That's legitimate. Now, when it comes to what you're talking about, and again, I don't know which bishop this is or anything like that, maybe he knows people, but I think that, like, maybe if you led with the argument, like, this will really stick it to the other side, that's probably going to make it sound like, indeed, you're politicizing it. But if you're like, look, this feast is one of the most glorious feasts there are, and we live in a time where people have forgotten about the sacred nature of life all the way through because Jesus blessed it with his life, that seems to me not politicizing in this sort of like small p derogatory way that we're talking about it. This is talking about the reality of the times we live in and what feast the church provides for her children to stand up in solidarity with what Jesus Christ himself has blessed in his own life.
Well, this kind of ties back to what we were saying last week about the Mass. And to go full-on nerd, Bo, J.R. Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings, he has the day that Sauron, like the evil villain, is defeated, is March 25th.
Right.
And I think Tolkien, a devout Catholic, was really onto something there. And that, so with all that we're talking about, Bo, like when we do this show, like part of what sometimes wells up inside me is just this question, like, so where do we go from here? And sometimes the answer is like a lot simpler than we make it out to be. So we think about
find a volcano, throw a ring into it.
That's right.
Just simple things.
No, I mean Tolkien. That's another important truth too, because God attained victory on March 25th when Our Lady said yes to his call, and the Christ child was birthed in her womb. In the sense that that's like once that moment takes place, we know that Satan's days are numbered.
Right.
And so when we think about our existence together, it does go back to the celebration of the Mass, because the Mass, we don't, like when we celebrate the Eucharist, we don't have to say like, oh, we've had this beautiful liturgy, ergo, and then like think about like, well, how does this apply? Like the liturgy itself and our participation in the Eucharist is a foretaste, and really actually you could say an instantiation of the kingdom that's to come. Sorry, I'm kind of blabbing here, but like Newman, he has this beautiful sermon called Omnipotence and Bonds, and he draws an analogy between the incarnation and then the Son of God coming to us on the altar in the host. And in both cases, divinity chose to be constrained, so to speak, and that's how the kingdom breaks into our lives.
See, you're thinking of like very good holy theological things. I'm thinking about how weird traditions get started. Like someone was pointing out, there's evidently a tradition in Spain on the Annunciation. I think just one city, but it's crazy enough, where a guy dresses up very flamboyantly, like a flamboyant devil, and then he jumps over babies. And it's supposed to symbolize something about the Annunciation. That seems really scary. You put your baby down there, but I have to admit, like, I probably would have paid money to be able to be there the first day that started, because that's pretty crazy. So then I was thinking with your Tolkien thing, like, through the years, how could we get some, like, really cool things started? And you're like, oh, well, I was joking about throwing a ring into a volcano every March 25th, or someone bites your finger on every March 25th. And then I'm like, what would happen? What would be very Catholic is 100 years from now, everyone does this, they're not dead sure why, but you make, how you can make lava cake? And so, you make a lava cake, and then you cut it up, and whoever gets the piece of pie with a severed finger with a ring on it, like, is the king of the Annunciation Day. That sounds like how a Catholic tradition would get started.
No, that's the part of Catholic culture that I really just love and embrace. And, I don't know. I don't want to pick on any group, but, I think there are some forms of Christianity where it's like, well, we don't want to get too... Like, there's a certain
the
sobriety.
Pilgrims outlawed Christmas, man. Just throw down. Point it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pilgrims, shots fired.
Yeah.
But, different commentators have pointed out, like, part of the beautiful nature of the account of the creation in Genesis is the kind of extravagance that God has. Like, is there any sort of utility to, like, a giraffe or Leviathan or something like that? But God's just like, shebang, and it's all amazing and complex and sort of like, there's something that's not just like practical about the way the world is. And Catholics have sort of, like in their actual day-to-day life, have really kind of run with it. So you mentioned some of the, like, lava cake. I think about King's Cake on Mardi Gras.
Right.
Like, we're going to hide a little baby in the cake.
Yeah.
It's just great.
No, I agree with what you're pointing out, and to make the point about the Annunciation, too. When Job is asking God about all of these things, like, he kind of does MTV Cribs Heaven version, and he's all like, check out this awesome behemoth, check out this Leviathan. And then, Job's like, and God's like, I don't remember where you were when I formed the stars, which, like, all of that's a very awesome answer. But it goes back to the Annunciation, too. If we're making fun of people, like, joke around with, like, the British, right? If God was British, Gabriel writes, like, Dearest Mary, right? Like a very formal memo.
Yeah.
Please type back yes or no. But luckily God is not totally British, at least. And so what does he do? He sends Gabriel and occasions Bud. Like, I just think about it aesthetically. Occasions a scene that we have painted endlessly because of the sheer beauty inherent just in the description of the scene. Before you even get in the fact that it's absolutely true and world-changing and everything about that, think about how every opportunity through the ages people have taken to render the Annunciation because of the sheer beauty of what's communicated, God asking humanity through this angel to be a part of his will. And then Mary, in the various ways people have her respond, like, she's thinking about it. It looks like she's prayerful, that she's reaching out to it. Mary as an enthroned queen. Mary as a 14-year-old girl. Everything in between. It's like God knows how to throw a lavish party, even when it comes to saving us from the darkness of sin.
Well, and one of my favorite icons is the icon of Our Lady with the Christ child in her womb. And behind Jesus, you see the stars of the universe. And so these Eastern renditions of this, they really capture the fact that infinity dwelled in infancy, And so, I don't know, Bo, if I were going to give a challenge to our listeners, I would say make a bigger deal of the Annunciation. There's so many great truths embedded in this feast day. So I don't know if that's a matter of finding traditions that your family can celebrate, or springing an icon of Our Lady on your great aunt or whatever. But do something next March 25th.
Yeah, and you're going for all the nice ones. I'm thinking of ways that we could make practical, fun traditions. So in the Magnificat, right, Mary says, cast down the mighty from their thrones. What if we made, it's a thing you're supposed to, how, on St. Patrick's Day, you're supposed to pinch someone if they're not wearing green?
Yeah.
I think it should be you try to kick people out of their chairs. Right? Wouldn't that be a fun Annunciation Day?
Jimmy,
activity?
keep your head on a swivel over there.
Yeah, what do you have to be wearing that if you don't have it, you get kicked out of your chair?
Maybe you could knock caps off of people's heads.
That's right. Yeah, and it's good luck or something like that.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of. We're not being imaginative people. So if you want to actually, call in or text into the show about imaginative ways to do Annunciation, Bud has down all the really good pious ones. I have all the violent ones down. Maybe if you have something in the middle that we can all do, make sure to let us know. Well, Bud, we got about a minute left.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to leave off note-wise with the Annunciation?
Not anything very pious. I just think it's hilarious as you were talking. It was probably sort of an obnoxious person like ourselves that came up with pinching people on St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
I need an excuse to, flirt with the girls.
And my favorite thing about all that, right, is there were probably 10 or 12 really good ideas, but pinching stayed. So
that and Shamrock Shakes.
Yeah, everyone's all make that shake green and I'll pay an extra $1. And everyone's you sure you don't want this icon of St. Patrick? They're give me the shake and put green in it. And then that's
The Uncommon Good, not sponsored by any fast food restaurant.
That's right. McDonald's is not helping us out in any way.
Mercy College will actually help you recover from your experiences therein.
Well, may Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, in our family, in our city, our state, the world, the galaxy, the entire kit and caboodle of the universe. This is The Uncommon Good. We'll be back next week. But there's all sorts of stuff that's happened that I'm starting to forget what I'm supposed to tell you about that's coming up. We do have the men's Faith for the Journey conference, and that is happening March 30th, this coming Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at St. Francis of Assisi Church in West Des Moines. If you go to iowacatholicradio.com, you can register. We have Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, Deacon Tom Bradley, and Deacon Randy Keel. There's going to be a good time. Make sure to make it out to that. The ladies' Mosaic Luncheon, the next one would be Thursday, April 11th. That's 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. out at St. Francis. The Man Up West Power Lunch is Friday, April 12th at noon at St. Francis. And then the Iowa Catholic Radio Golf Outing, June 18th. You're going to come back, Bud, and show everybody your Tiger Woods-esque golf game. And
I can caddy.
You could probably do Tiger Woods in a slump, right? You can do that at least.
Just start tossing clubs into the leg. No, if you've had any trouble this Lent praying, one great way to try to get back into that discipline is just by setting your alarm. So here on Iowa Catholic Radio, we pray the Rosary at 5:30 a.m., 9:30 in the morning, and then 9:30 p.m., and also the Angelus daily at 6 a.m.
Oh, right. We were talking about the Angelus, and then there you go. You can pray along with us.
Right on the radio.
Right on the radio and be able to do that. As always, this is a ministry that's not just, a radio show that plays. It's not just the people who are on air speaking. You guys are part of this ministry, and if you feel so called to support this ministry, please make sure to donate at iowacatholicradio.com, or you can call 515-223-1150. Iowa Catholic Radio on 24/7, penetrating walls, trying to penetrate hearts with the grace of Jesus Christ. So make sure to help us if you are so moved to do so. This is the Uncommon Good for Bud Marr. This is Bo Bonner. We'll be seeing you next week. Have a wonderful week. I hope the weather starts to treat you a little bit more spring-like, and God bless with the rest of Lent. We'll see you next week.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard every week on wonderful Catholic stations like this one, and anytime on podcast. Just search for The Uncommon Good.